I shouldn't even be saying this out loud again. But every time I close my eyes, I'm back there, back in those woods. And I keep remembering the same thing over and over, like my mind refuses to let it go. Don't look too long into the trees, because if you do, it learns you're watching back. I know how that sounds. I do. If I heard someone else say it, I'd probably laugh it off too. Maybe even say they watched one too many late-night videos and scared themselves for fun. But I wasn't alone when it started. None of us were. It was deep in the Olympic National Forest in Washington State. Miles of trees that don't seem to end. Just layers and layers of dark trunks standing too close together like they're listening. You know how forests are supposed to feel alive? This one didn't feel alive. It felt aware. I remember the first night we noticed something off. At first it was nothing you could point at, just a feeling. Like when you walk into a room and realize the conversation stopped a second before you opened the door. Then we started seeing it, between the trees. Not clearly, never clearly. Just movement, where there shouldn't be any. Tall movement. Too tall. And every time one of us turned our head to look directly at it, there was nothing there. Just trees. Just silence. Just fog sitting low between branches like it didn't want to rise. But the second you looked away, something changed. I remember one of the campers. He joked at first, said it was probably just a trick of the light. You know, branches shifting, shadows playing games with tired eyes. We all wanted it to be that, because the alternative didn't make sense. But there was this one moment, I'll never forget it. We were standing near the edge of the camp. Everyone had gone quiet without agreeing to. That kind of quiet where nobody wants to be the first to admit they're uncomfortable. I looked into the trees. Nothing. I blinked. And something was closer. Not walking, not running, just there. Between two trunks that were empty seconds before. And I remember thinking, this is the part where your mind tries to protect you, where it says, you're imagining it. Where it tries to close the gap between what you saw and what you're willing to accept. But then someone whispered, "Did you see that?" And I knew it wasn't just me. Because once you notice it, you stop trusting the moments when you're not looking. That's the worst part. Not what you see in the woods. It's what you realize might be moving the second you stop watching. So tell me, have you ever sworn you saw something move in the trees, but when you looked again, it was gone? All right. Before all of that started messing with my head, I should probably tell you who I am and what I was even doing out there. My name doesn't really matter for this, but at the time I was a seasonal park worker in Washington's Olympic National Forest. Basically, I was one of those guys who gets paid to walk trails, check campsite safety, clean up after tourists who think leave no trace is optional, and occasionally argue with wildlife I'm not qualified to identify. I used to think the job was simple. I really did. I used to think the most dangerous thing out there would be bears. We had signs everywhere. Big yellow warnings like the forest was some kind of rules-based amusement park. Store food properly. Make noise while hiking. Do not approach wildlife. And I remember saying this out loud once at the station, half joking. I used to think bear warning signs were the scariest part of the job. Turns out bears were not the problem. At the time, everyone laughed. Even the ranger did. Looking back, I don't think he was laughing because it was funny. I think he was laughing because he didn't want to talk about what actually was a problem out there. The forest itself. It wasn't just big. It was endless, in a way that makes your sense of direction feel useless. You look one way, and it's just layers of evergreen trees stacked so tightly together, it feels like a wall. You look another direction, and it's the same wall again, just slightly different shapes. And the fog, it wasn't like normal fog you see in cities or near lakes. This was heavier. It didn't move like weather. It sat low between the trunks, like it was resting there on purpose. Even sound behaved differently. You could shout and it didn't echo right. It just disappeared into the trees like something was absorbing it. We had a small remote camp set up, just a clearing with a few tents, a fire pit, and enough space for maybe 6 to 8 people at most. That week we had a small group. There was my friend Mark. He was the kind of guy who joked about everything. Even when things didn't make sense, he'd try to turn it into something funny just to keep the mood light. Then there was Ranger Ellis, older, quiet, the type who didn't waste words. And he'd been working forests like this for years. The kind of man who knew what was normal and what wasn't, even if he didn't always say it directly. And there was Jenna. Jenna didn't talk much, but when she did, it was usually about something she noticed that nobody else had seen yet. Which sounds small, until you realize she was almost always right. The night started off normal. Campfire cooking, cheap coffee, people trying to act tougher than they actually were. You know how it goes. Someone tells a ghost story just to break the silence. Someone else adds sound effects. And then everyone laughs a little too loudly because silence in a place like that feels heavier than any story. We did all that too. We talked about weird hiking experiences, rumors about strange noises in the woods, and things that go missing on trails and show up miles away later. Normal camp stuff. At least, it was supposed to be normal. But even then, there were small things I remember now that didn't feel right. Like how Jenna kept staring into the tree line longer than anyone else. Or how Mark stopped joking for a second and said half under his breath, "Does it feel like something's standing out there watching us, or am I just tired?" We laughed it off. Even Ranger Ellis told him to get some sleep. But he didn't deny it. That was the first time I noticed that. And if I'm being honest with you, I didn't question it enough back then. Because if you were out there with us, sitting around that fire, surrounded by trees that don't seem to end, tell me the truth. Would you stay the night? The first night it happened, nobody called it anything serious. Not at first. Because in a place like that, your brain is constantly trying to explain things away. Every sound has a reason. Every shadow has a source. At least, that's what you want to believe. It started with Jenna. She was sitting a little away from the fire, closer to the edge of the clearing than the rest of us. I remember she wasn't joking anymore. She wasn't even reacting to Mark's usual comments. She just kept staring into the trees. Then she said it, quietly. Not like she wanted attention. More like she was testing if saying it out loud would make it less real. "There's something out there." Mark immediately laughed. Of course he did. "Yeah, bears? Elk? A very committed raccoon?" But Jenna didn't smile. She pointed slightly, not fully extending her arm, just enough to indicate direction. "Between the trees. It's tall." We all looked. Nothing. Just trunks, fog, dark gaps between branches. Ranger Ellis finally spoke up, calm as always. "Where exactly?" Jenna hesitated. And then she said something that stuck with me more than anything else that night. "I can only see it when I'm not looking straight at it." That's when the tone around the fire changed. Not dramatically, not like in movies, more like someone slowly lowered the volume on the world. People started looking around instead of at each other. Mark leaned forward a little. "Okay, define not looking straight at it." Jenna didn't answer immediately. Then she did something I still think about. She shifted her eyes slightly, just off-center, toward the trees, and her voice dropped. "It's there." We all turned at once, directly into the forest. Nothing. Just darkness between trees. Then silence. Too long. Mark exhaled. "All right. Either we're all sleep-deprived or—" He didn't finish, because Jenna spoke again. It moved. We looked again. Nothing. This is where things started to break in a way I didn't understand at the time. Because every single time someone looked directly into that section of forest, there was nothing. But the moment your attention drifted, even slightly, something changed. Not dramatically, just enough to make your mind question itself. A shape where there wasn't one before. A shift in spacing between trees. A vertical outline that didn't match anything natural. Ranger Ellis stood up slowly. That was the first time I saw him actually hesitate. "Everyone," he said, "stop scanning. Just pick one point and hold it." So we did. We all stared. Seconds passed. Nothing. Then someone blinked. And Mark whispered, almost angry now, "Okay, I swear something just moved." We all snapped back to the exact same spot. Nothing again. That's when Mark pulled out his phone. "I'm recording this. If there's something out there, we're getting proof." 2 others followed. One of the campers grabbed a GoPro from his bag. We pointed everything toward the trees, held still, recorded, for almost a full minute. And when we played it back, the footage was wrong, not completely blank. Worse than that, there were frames where the trees looked stretched vertically, like something tall was passing between them, but the camera refused to fully render it. Glitches, brief vertical distortions, then normal forest again. Mark laughed, but it wasn't his usual laugh. "Okay, that's just a camera issue, low light compression, whatever." I remember saying it before I even thought about it. We all agreed it was just sleep deprivation, because that's cheaper than admitting something was out there. Nobody laughed at that, not even Mark. That night, we tried to ignore it. We told ourselves it was tricks of the eye, fatigue, darkness playing with perception. But then Ranger Ellis walked to the edge of the camp and came back quiet. He didn't sit down. He just said, "Stay inside the firelight." That was it. No explanation, no jokes, just that. And when I followed his gaze later, just briefly, just for a second, I saw something near the edge of the clearing. Not fully formed, just impressions in the dirt, footprints, but wrong, too long, too spaced out. Like whatever made them wasn't walking on the same scale as us. I looked up fast. Nothing there. Of course. And nothing ever was when you looked directly. But now I knew something I didn't know before. It wasn't gone. It was only invisible when you convinced yourself it should be. And that was the first night we stopped sleeping properly. After that first night, nothing went back to normal. Even though we tried to act like it did. That's the thing about fear in a place like that. You don't get one big moment where everything changes. It happens slowly, like the forest is adjusting to you realizing it's there. Each night after that, it got closer. Not in a way you could easily measure at first, but if you were paying attention, really paying attention, you could feel it. On the second night, it wasn't deep in the woods anymore. It was closer to the tree line. On the third night, it wasn't just at the tree line. It was inside it, in between the outermost trunks, and by the fourth night, it was near the edge of the camp. Still not fully seen, still never visible when looked at directly, but always there, always just outside the corner of your attention. That's when we noticed something important. We didn't find it on purpose. It kind of revealed itself through exhaustion. Mark was the first one to say it out loud. He hadn't slept properly in 2 days. None of us had. He was sitting by the fire, staring into the dark, and he said, "It doesn't move when we look at it." We all turned. He kept going. "But it moves when we don't." At first we argued with him, because that sounded impossible. So we tested it. We set up a simple idea. Everyone watches one section of the trees at the same time. No shifting, no turning away. We did it for almost 10 minutes. Nothing happened. Not just trees, fog, stillness. Mark even started to relax a little. "See, nothing, it's just..." And then Jenna blinked, not even intentionally, just a normal blink, and she froze. Her face changed immediately. "It moved!" We all snapped our attention back. Nothing. Mark shook his head. No, we're not doing this. That's coincidence." So we tried again. Same spot, everyone watching. Minutes passed. Nothing. Then someone looked down for half a second, just to adjust their sitting position. And when they looked back up, something in the trees had changed position. Not far, not dramatically, but enough that it couldn't be explained away. A gap between 2 trunks that wasn't aligned the same anymore. A vertical presence slightly offset from where it had been. And every single time we looked directly at it, it wasn't there. And that's when things started to break inside the group. Not just fear, something worse. Doubt about their own senses. Mark stopped sleeping entirely. He said he didn't want to miss it moving. Jenna started counting blinks under her breath. I heard her once whisper, "If I blink too long, it might get closer." Even Ranger Ellis, who had been calm the entire time, stopped giving explanations. He just started watching. Always watching. We stopped using phones properly after that. At first, we tried recording again. But the footage got worse. Devices would shut off at random moments, especially during blinks. And when we managed to review anything, there were gaps. Not cuts like normal video errors, missing frames. Like time itself skipped, where attention wasn't locked in. Mark slammed his phone down once and said, "This is impossible. Our cameras don't just lose seconds like that." But Jenna just stared at the playback and said quietly, "It only exists when we don't fully see it." That was the first time nobody argued with her, because arguing felt like ignoring something that was already too close. By the fifth night, we weren't talking much anymore. We were just watching, refusing to look away, afraid of blinking, afraid of missing the moment something changed again. And I remember sitting there, staring into the trees, eyes burning, trying not to blink at all. Thinking, how long can a person keep this up? And more importantly, would you risk blinking just to prove it's not real? The final night didn't feel like a night anymore. It felt like pressure, like the forest itself was closing in without moving. We all agreed, without saying it out loud, that nobody was sleeping again. Nobody was looking away. Nobody was blinking unless they absolutely had to. We formed a circle around the fire, all of us, backs tight, shoulders locked, eyes fixed outward into the trees. At first, it almost felt manageable. Then the silence started to change. Not louder, not quieter, just heavier. Mark was the first to break. Not mentally, physically. I can't keep my eyes like this," he whispered. And I remember Jenna responding without looking at him. "Don't blink too long." That's when it happened. We realized the pattern was wrong. Not the forest. Us. It wasn't moving when we looked away completely. It was moving in the smallest gaps we never controlled. Blinking, eye shifts, water building in the eyes. That fraction of a second when your vision resets, that's when it moved. And once we understood that, everything collapsed. Because no human can stop blinking. It started slowly. One person blinked out of instinct, then froze, and when they opened their eyes again, they screamed. Not because something new was there, but because something had changed position again, closer, between us, not outside the circle anymore, inside it. The fire flickered hard, like it reacted. Mark started shouting that we should all keep our eyes open at the same time, but panic destroys coordination. Someone blinked. Someone else turned their head half a degree, and every time it happened, something shifted. Like it was always occupying the space no one was actively holding in their awareness. Then I understood something I still can't fully explain even now. Then it wasn't approaching us from outside. It had been building itself inside the gaps of our attention all along, reassembling itself in every blink, every fraction of lost sight, until there was nowhere left for it to come from, because it was already here. And then I saw it. Not clearly, not fully, no shape a brain can hold. Just height. Wrong height. Too much vertical presence for anything human. Standing between us in the circle, not attacking, not moving toward us, just existing in the spaces our attention failed to cover. Waiting. Like it had finally learned the rhythm of how we see. And now it didn't need to chase anymore. The fire dimmed again, and I remember thinking something I shouldn't have been able to think in that moment. If I stop focusing for even a second, I lose it again, or it gains me. I don't know which one is worse. And the last thing I remember clearly is realizing I'm still here, still speaking, still trying not to blink too long while I tell you this, because even now, I don't know if it ever left. So if you ever feel like something is in the trees, don't test it by looking away. And tell me this, what do you think it was? Would you survive if you couldn't blink without risking what's watching you change position? Has anything ever felt like it followed your attention when the dark got too quiet? Because if you ever go into the woods after hearing this, and you feel like something is just outside your sight, Don't assume it's outside the camp. Sometimes, it's already between you.